Rain hammered the metal rooftops of Waystation 7 like 1,000 angry fists. Dan Rivers pulled his jacket tighter and jogged toward his freighter, dodging puddles that reflected the neon signs of closed shops. The industrial district always emptied after dark, leaving only cargo haulers like him to finish their work in peace. He had 3 more crates to load before he could sleep. His back ached and his shoulders burned, but the faster he finished, the sooner he could launch at dawn. Time meant money in his line of work, and Dan had precious little of either. The sound hit him first, a low whimper, almost lost beneath the rain's drumming. Dan froze mid-step and listened. There it was again, coming from behind the shipping containers stacked near his loading ramp. Every instinct told him to ignore it. This station housed thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds. Strange noises were normal. Getting involved in other people's problems was the fastest way to lose money or worse. But something about that sound pulled at him. It reminded him of the strays back on Earth, the ones that huddled in Chicago's ruins during winter storms. Dan changed direction and walked toward the containers. Water ran down his face as he peered into the shadows between the metal boxes. His headlamp cut through the darkness. What he saw made him step back. A massive creature crouched in the narrow space, scales gleaming dull green in the light. Wings wrapped around something small, protecting it from the rain. The creature's head lifted slowly, revealing a long snout and eyes that glowed faint yellow in the darkness. Dan recognized the species. Scarith, dragon-like beings from the outer colonies, known for their pride and territorial nature. They rarely left their home systems, and they certainly didn't huddle in the rain like abandoned animals. The Scarith's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. Dan tensed, ready to run. But instead of a roar, a weak voice emerged, speaking broken standard Galactic. "Please food, my children starve." Dan's eyes adjusted to the darkness. He could see 3 tiny shapes nestled against the larger creature's body. Baby Scarith, each no bigger than a house cat. Their mother's wings trembled as she tried to shield them from the cold rain. "How long have you been here?" Dan asked, keeping his voice steady. 5 days, maybe 6. The mother's voice cracked. "Please, I have nothing, but I beg you, they need food." Dan noticed details now. The mother's scales were cracked and dull, not the polished shine healthy Scarith displayed. Her body was thin beneath those wings, ribs visible through her hide. The bobbies made tiny chirping sounds, weak and desperate. "Why aren't you on a Scarith station? Your people take care of their own." The mother's head drooped. Shame filled her voice. "They cast us out. My children were born wrong. Clan law says they must die. I refused, so we all die together slowly." Dan stepped closer despite the warning bells in his head. He could see the bobbies now. One had eyes that didn't focus, clouded and blank. Another's wing bent at an unnatural angle. The third was half the size it should be, struggling to lift its head. "What's your name?" Dan asked. "Vara, these are my children. No names yet. Scarith only named those who survived their first season." Vara's voice dropped to a whisper. "They will not survive without help." Dan watched a group of insectoid aliens walk past the alley entrance. They glanced toward Vara, saw her situation, and hurried away without slowing. This wasn't the first time they'd seen her. Everyone on this station knew she was here. Everyone ignored her. His freighter waited 20 meters away. He could walk back to it, finish loading, and launch at dawn like planned. Vara and her bobbies weren't his problem. The galaxy was full of tragedy, and one human couldn't fix it all. Dan thought of his own mother. She'd raised him alone after his father died in the resource wars. Chicago's ruins offered no charity for a widow and child. His mother had worked 3 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, and made sure Dan never went hungry even when she did. She taught him that strength wasn't measured by how much you could carry, but by what you chose to pick up. "Can you walk?" Dan asked. Vara's head snapped up. "What?" Can you walk to my ship? It's not far. You would help us. Disbelief filled her voice. I'm offering a ride and some food. That's all I've got. Dan gestured toward his freighter. But we need to move now before station security decides to sweep this area. Vara struggled to her feet, moving carefully to keep her bobbies protected. She swayed, weak from days without food. Dan moved closer and let her lean against him for support. Her scales felt rough and cold against his jacket. Why? Vara asked as they walked. Others have passed, all ignore us. Why do you stop? Dan didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was stupidity. Maybe it was exhaustion making him sentimental. Maybe it was just the right thing to do. Because someone asked for help, he said simply. They reached his freighter's ramp. Dan helped Vara inside, then sealed the hatch behind them. The cargo bay was cramped and cluttered with shipping containers, but the back section had enough space for unexpected passengers. Vara collapsed against the wall, her bobbies tumbling from her wings onto the floor. They chirped and squeaked, exploring their new surroundings with cautious curiosity. The smallest one bumped into Dan's boot and recoiled in fear. Stay here, I'll get food, Dan said. He returned minutes later with military ration packs and 2 bottles of water. Vara stared at the supplies like they were precious gems. Her claws trembled as she reached for them. Take what you need, Dan said. Vara tore open a ration pack and divided it among her bobbies first. Only after they were eating did she take anything for herself. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, tears running down her scaled face. Dan sat on a crate and watched. He just complicated his life tremendously. Scarith refugees weren't exactly common cargo, and helping them might bring trouble he couldn't afford. But as he watched those 3 tiny bobbies eat their first real meal in days, Dan knew he'd made the right choice. Even if it cost him everything. Morning light filtered through the freighter's small windows, painting stripes across the cargo bay floor. Dan woke to the sound of soft clicking. He'd slept in his pilot chair, unwilling to leave his unexpected passengers alone on their first night aboard. The smallest baby Scarith stood near his boots, making gentle clicking noises while staring up at him with oversized eyes. The little creature tilted its head, studying Dan like he was the most fascinating thing in the universe. Hey there, small fry, Dan whispered. The baby chirped and scurried back to its mother. Vara lay curled around her children, awake but exhausted. Her yellow eyes tracked Dan's movements with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. How'd you sleep? Dan asked. Better than we have in many days. You have given us great kindness. Vara's voice was stronger now, though still rough. What payment do you require? Dan stood and stretched, his spine popping. Already told you, no payment. But you must want something. All beings trade for what they give. This is how the galaxy works. Maybe where you're from, but I don't need anything from you. Dan grabbed a water bottle and took a long drink. Besides, looks like you've got your hands full with these 3. Vara watched him with confusion that bordered on suspicion. In her world, kindness without price made no sense. It violated everything she understood about survival and social contracts. The blind baby bumped into a crate, let out a startled squeak, then began making rapid clicking sounds. Dan realized it was using echolocation to map its surroundings. The clicks bounced off the cargo bay walls, creating a sound picture of the space. Smart kid, Dan said, using sound to see. That one was deemed most effective by the clan elders. They said a blind Scarith has no value, no future. They ordered death first. Vara's voice hardened. I carried that child in my jaws and fled in the night. The clan hunters followed us for 3 systems before we escaped. Dan knelt near the blind baby. It sensed his presence and clicked faster, nervous but curious. He clicked his tongue against his teeth, mimicking the pattern. The baby froze, then clicked back, then clicked again faster. Dan clicked in response, creating a simple rhythm. The baby began bouncing excitedly, treating it like a game. Within minutes, they were making clicking patterns back and forth while the other two bobbies watched. Vara stared in wonder. No one has played with them before, not even other clan members when they were newly hatched. They're kids, kids need to play. Dan stood and checked his navigation computer. We've got a 2-week journey ahead. Might as well make it comfortable. You all have names. Scarith Custom forbids nomming until first season survival is proven. These 3 will never receive names under clan law. That's nonsense. Everything deserves a name. Dan pointed to the smallest one. How about Pip? You know, small but mighty. Pip chirped enthusiastically, as if understanding and approving. This one with the clever clicks I'm calling Echo. Dan gestured to the blind baby, who clicked in acknowledgement. And this strong one with the bent wing, your Patch. The third baby spread its twisted wing proudly. Vara's eyes widened. You name my children, you give them identity. This is a sacred gift among my people. They're good names for good kids. Now, let's talk about ship rules. I need to prep for launch, and I can't have little ones running into dangerous areas. For the next hour, Dan showed Vara the safe zones and hazard points throughout his freighter. She absorbed every detail with intense focus, determined to keep her children from causing problems. Her intelligence surprised him. Despite being cast out and starved, she learned quickly and asked smart questions. Pip followed Dan everywhere during the tour, staying close to his heels like a puppy. The little one tried to mimic Dan's walk, taking exaggerated steps that made Vara chirp in what Dan realized was laughter. This small one bonds to you already, Vara observed. In Scarith society, this would mean you are recognized as protector. It is a role of great responsibility. I'm just being friendly. Kids like friendly. You are being human. I begin to understand why your species confuses the galaxy. Dan started the launch sequence. The freighter rumbled and shook as engines powered up. The bobbies huddled against Vara, frightened by the unfamiliar vibrations. Dan noticed their distress and quickly grabbed a spare blanket from his quarters. Here, wrap them in this. The vibrations will settle once we're in space. Vara bundled her children in the soft fabric. They calmed immediately, making contented sounds. She stared at the blanket like it was made of precious metal. This is yours, your sleeping cloth. I've got another one, they need it more. Why do you do these things? Give food, give shelter, give comfort, you gain nothing. We may bring danger to you. Dan sealed the cargo bay and headed for the cockpit. My mom used to say that being human means choosing to care even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. The freighter lifted off smoothly. Through the window, Waystation 7 shrank below them until it became just another light among millions. Dan set the autopilot and returned to the cargo bay. Vara had arranged a small nest using cargo padding and Dan's blanket. The bobbies were already asleep, curled together in a pile of scales and tiny wings. Pip clutched one corner of the blanket in its claws, holding tight to the first soft thing it had ever owned. Your mother must have been wise, Vara said quietly. My clan would call her weak for teaching such things, but I think perhaps my clan was wrong about many things. Dan sat against the wall, keeping watch over the sleeping bobbies. Your clan was definitely wrong about these 3. They're survivors, just like their mom. Vara's eyes glistened. You give us more than food and shelter. You give us hope that somewhere in this vast galaxy, worth is measured by more than strength and perfection. Hope's important. Sometimes it's all we've got. Outside the window, stars stretched into lines as the freighter jumped to faster-than-light travel. Inside the cargo bay, 4 refugees from a harsh world slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Dan stayed awake a while longer, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. But as he watched Pip's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath, he found he didn't regret it. Not even a little bit. The fifth day in space started normally enough. Dan ran system diagnostics while Vara helped organize cargo containers. She had insisted on making herself useful, refusing to simply accept charity. Her strength was returning with regular meals, and she moved the heavy containers with ease. Pip and Patch played a chasing game between the boxes while Echo practiced navigating using sound alone. The blind baby had mapped every centimeter of the cargo bay and rarely bumped into things anymore. Echo's clicks had become a constant background noise that Dan found oddly comforting. Around midday, Pip stopped playing and curled into a ball. Dan noticed immediately. The little one always had energy, always wanted to explore and play. Seeing Pip motionless sent alarm bells ringing in his head. "Hey, Vara, something's wrong with Pip." Vara rushed over and touched her smallest child. Her whole body went rigid. Fever, very hot. Dan knelt beside them and carefully touched Pip's scales. The baby felt like heated metal against his palm. Pip's breathing came fast and shallow, tiny chest heaving with effort. "How hot is too hot for your species?" Dan asked. "This is death temperature. I have seen it before in weak hatchlings. They burn from inside and nothing stops it." Vara's voice cracked. "This is why the clan demanded death. They knew Pip would not survive." "That's not happening, not on my ship." Dan scooped up Pip, feeling the intense heat through his shirt. "I've got a medical kit. Basic stuff, but something might help." He rushed to the small med bay and laid Pip on the examination table. The baby's eyes were half closed, barely responding. Dan pulled out every medical supply he owned, but it was all designed for human biology. Fever reducers, antibiotics, pain medication, none of it labeled for Scarith use. Vara stood in the doorway, Patch and Echo pressed against her legs. "There is no cure. The clan elders could do nothing but watch weak ones die. It is natural selection." "Natural selection is a fancy way of saying we gave up too soon." Dan grabbed his communication device. "I know a xenobiologist. Lives 3 systems away, but maybe she can help remotely." He sent an emergency signal and waited. Each second felt like an hour. Pip's breathing got worse, rasping and irregular. The tiny baby shivered despite the fever burning through its body. The comm device finally beeped. A woman's face appeared on the screen, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Dan Rivers. Haven't heard from you in 2 years. This better be good because you woke me at 3 in the morning. Dr. Rains, I need help. I've got a baby Scarith with severe fever. Temperature is way too high, breathing is failing. What can I do?" Dr. Rains sat up straighter, suddenly alert. "You have a Scarith on your cargo freighter. How did that happen?" "Long story, can you help or not?" "Send me vital signs, everything you can measure." Dan worked quickly, using every scanner he had. Dr. Rain studied the data, her expression growing more concerned. "This isn't just fever. The immune system is attacking its own body. Common in Scarith hatchlings with developmental issues. Their biology is extremely rigid. Anything outside normal parameters gets rejected." "So we just let Pip die?" Dan's voice rose. "There has to be something." "Pip, you named it." Dr. Rains shook her head. "Dan, I'm 3 days away at best. Even if I came right now, I'd arrive too late." "Then tell me what to do from there." Dr. Rains was quiet for a moment. "There's an old technique. Risky, probably won't work, but it's the only shot. You need to lower the body temperature gradually while supporting the respiratory system. Too fast and you cause shock. Too slow and the fever wins." "How do I do that?" "You're not going to like this. Scarith biology responds to external temperature regulation. You need to keep direct contact, use your own body heat to stabilize. Human temperature is much lower than Scarith baseline. It might work." Dan looked at Pip, barely breathing now. "How long?" "Constant contact for at least 24 hours, maybe longer. And Dan, the baby might not make it even if you do everything right. This condition has a high mortality rate. Tell me what else I need to do. For the next hour, Dr. Rains walked Dan through every step. He set up a makeshift breathing support using equipment designed for humans, but adapted for smaller airways. He prepared fluid supplements that might work for Scarith biology. He learned how to monitor vital signs he'd never measured before. Then he picked up Pip and held the tiny baby against his chest. The heat was intense, almost painful, but Dan didn't let go. I need to monitor this constantly, Dan told Vara. Can you handle the ship controls if I talk you through it? Vara nodded, determination replacing despair. Teach me. I will do whatever needed. The hours blurred together. Dan sat in the cargo bay, Pip pressed against his skin, talking Vara through every ship system. She learned faster than anyone he'd ever taught, absorbing information and applying it instantly. Patch and Echo stayed close, watching their sibling with worried clicks and chirps. Dan talked to them softly, explaining what he was doing, hoping his calm voice would comfort them. Around hour 12, Pip stopped shivering. Dan checked the temperature, still too high but dropping slowly. Around hour 20, Pip's breathing improved, still labored but more regular. Around hour 30, Pip's eyes opened. The little baby looked up at Dan and made a weak chirping sound. Dan nearly cried with relief. Hey there, small fry, welcome back. Vara appeared at his side, having set the ship on autopilot. She touched Pip gently, feeling the lower temperature, hearing the steadier breathing. You did not sleep. You did not eat. You held my child for more than a full day cycle. Tears ran down her scaled face. Why? What makes one human care so much for creatures not his own? Dan adjusted his grip on Pip, making sure the baby stayed warm and secure. Because worth isn't about being perfect or strong or meeting some arbitrary standard. Every life matters. Every kid deserves a chance. My clan taught that weakness must be culled, that only the strongest deserve resources. Vara's voice shook. But you spend your resources, your strength, your time on the weakest among us. This makes no sense by Scarith logic. Maybe Scarith logic is wrong. Vara looked at her 3 children, Pip recovering in Dan's arms, Echo clicking happily now that their sibling was safe, Patch spreading their twisted wing in celebration. Yes, she said quietly, I think it is. The warning alarm woke Dan from his first real sleep in 2 days. He jumped from his bunk and ran to the cockpit, where Vara sat studying the navigation screen like he'd taught her. What's wrong? Dan asked. Proximity alert. We approach Fremont Station in 1 hour. You said to wake you. Vara's claws moved carefully over the controls. I maintained course and speed as instructed. Dan checked the readouts and nodded in approval. Good work. Fremont is just a refueling stop. We'll be in and out fast. But as they approached the station, Dan noticed something odd. More security ships than usual patrolled the docking areas. Bright display screens covered every surface, showing scrolling information. Dan activated the communication channel. Fremont Control, this is cargo freighter November 7 requesting docking clearance. Clearance granted November 7. Dock 23. Be advised, enhanced security protocols are in effect. Dan maneuvered the ship carefully into the assigned dock. Through the window, he could see those display screens more clearly now. His stomach dropped. Bounty notices, dozens of them, and right in the center, a detailed image of Vara with text below in standard Galactic. Vara, stay in the cargo bay. Don't let the kids make any noise. What is wrong? There's a bounty on you. Big one. Every hunter in 3 sectors probably knows you're out here. Vara's eyes widened with fear. I will take my children and leave. You have risked enough. We will find another way. You'll die within a day out there. Just stay hidden. I'll handle the refueling and get us gone. Dan sealed the cargo bay and headed for the station's fuel depot. His hands shook as he processed the refueling payment. The station felt different, tense. Too many eyes watching, too many beings studying faces in the crowd. He'd almost finished when a massive Scarith blocked his path. This one was different from Vara. Scales polished to gleaming perfection, muscles rippling under armored hide, clan markings tattooed across the snout. Cargo hauler. I am Kral, sanctioned hunter of the Scarith High Clan. I require access to your vessel. Dan kept his expression neutral. Sorry, restricted cargo, no unauthorized access. I do not request. I demand under salvage law. Stolen clan property is aboard your ship. I have tracked the criminal Vara to this station and sent markers lead to your dock. I don't know what you're talking about. Kral leaned closer, his breath hot and smelling of sulfur. Do not play games, human. The traitor and her defective spawn are aboard your vessel. Clan law grants me right of reclamation. Surrender them, or I will take them by force. Station security approached, attracted by the confrontation. A Trilaxian officer held up 3 hands in a calming gesture. What seems to be the problem here? Kral turned to the officer. This human harbors stolen property. I demand immediate access for reclamation. I'm not harboring anything, Dan said quickly. Just carrying legitimate cargo to Haven Colony. The officer checked his datapad. The bounty notice is legitimate. Clan property rights are recognized under Galactic commerce law. If the accused items are aboard, you must surrender them. Items? You're calling sentient beings items. Scarith clan law defines them as such. We don't interfere in cultural matters. The officer looked uncomfortable but firm. I'm sorry, but you need to cooperate. Dan's mind raced. If they searched the ship, they'd find Vara and the children. If he refused, they'd arrest him and search anyway. Either way, he lost. I want to file a formal complaint. I invoke Earth Alliance humanitarian protocols. The officer blinked all 3 eyes in surprise. That's highly unusual. Those protocols are rarely used and require significant documentation. I've got time. How long does it take? Kral hissed in anger. He stalls, he protects the criminal. Everyone has the right to due process, Dan said, even humans with questionable cargo. The station commander arrived. A stern-faced Aurinian woman who clearly wanted this situation resolved quickly. What's happening at my dock? The Trilaxian officer explained the situation. The commander listened, then turned to Dan. You're claiming humanitarian protocols for Scarith refugees. I'm claiming that beings who can beg for their children's lives aren't property. They're people. Clan law disagrees, Kral growled. For millennia we have governed our own. The weak are culled, the strong survive. This is our way. Your way is wrong, Dan said flatly. The commander held up a hand before Kral could respond. This requires adjudication. Hunter Kral, you'll get your hearing. Dan Rivers, you'll get your protocols review, but it takes time to assemble a proper tribunal. How much time? Dan asked. 24 hours minimum. Kral's tail lashed in anger. The criminal may flee. Your ship will remain docked and under security watch, the commander told Dan. No one enters or leaves without authorization. The hearing will determine legal custody. Dan nodded, knowing it was the best he could hope for. Fine, but I want proper legal representation. You'll get it, dismissed, both of you. Dan returned to his ship and immediately went to the cargo bay. Vara stood waiting, her children huddled behind her. I heard everything through the ventilation system, she said quietly. You should surrender us. Your life, your ship, your freedom are all at risk now. Not happening. Dan, I cannot let you sacrifice yourself for us. You have given us so much already. Food, shelter, medicine, kindness. You saved Pip's life. I will not take your future as well. Dan sat heavily on a crate. Let me tell you about Earth. A few centuries ago, my ancestors decided some people were property too, decided that some lives mattered less than others, took a war and millions of deaths to prove them wrong. I'm not making that mistake again. Pip climbed into Dan's lap, chirping softly. Echo clicked in a pattern that Dan had learned meant concern. Patch spread their twisted wing protectively over their siblings. "You truly believe we are worth this trouble?" Vara asked. "I know you are." Vara moved closer and gently touched her forehead to Dan's, the highest sign of respect in Scarith culture. "Then we face this together. But if the tribunal rules against us, you will not resist. You will save yourself. Promise me this." Dan couldn't make that promise. Instead, he changed the subject. "I need to contact the Earth Alliance consulate. Call in every favor I've got. We've got 24 hours to build a case." "What case can be made against centuries of clan law?" "That sometimes the old ways need to change. That what's legal isn't always what's right." Dan stood, determination replacing his exhaustion, and that one human is willing to fight for what he believes in. Krall might have clan law on his side. He might have tradition and precedent and cultural sovereignty. But Dan had something more important. He had 3 small lives depending on him. And a dragon mother who'd risked everything for her children. That was worth fighting for, even if he lost everything. The cargo bay had transformed into a courtroom. Station officials arranged seating for the tribunal members while security forces stood at every entrance. Dan watched beings from a dozen species file in, each representing different legal perspectives on the case. Vara stood beside him, her children pressed against her legs. Pip trembled but stayed silent. Echo's clicks had stopped, the blind baby too frightened to use its navigation sounds. Patch kept their twisted wings spread, trying to look brave. The station commander took her seat at the center of the tribunal panel. To her left sat a Scarith ambassador, scales gleaming with clan authority markers. To her right, a human representative from the Earth Alliance consulate. The human was a woman named Lieutenant Sarah Grant. She'd arrived 2 hours earlier, reviewed Dan's case, and immediately told him the odds were not good. "This tribunal will address the matter of Vara of the Scarith High Clan and her offspring," the commander announced. "Hunter Krall claims right of reclamation under clan property law. Dan Rivers claims refugee status under Earth Alliance humanitarian protocols. We will hear both sides." Krall stepped forward, his massive form dominating the space. "The law is clear. Vara stole clan property. 3 hatchlings deemed unfit for survival were ordered terminated according to sacred tradition. Vara violated this order and fled with clan resources. She must return, and the defective offspring must be disposed of properly." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the non-human observers. Dan's heart sank. They were already on Krall's side. The Scarith ambassador spoke next. "Clan law has governed our species for 10,000 years. We do not interfere in other cultures. We ask the same respect for ours. Weakness threatens the entire clan. Resources given to the unfit mean death for the strong. This is survival, not cruelty." Lieutenant Grant stood. "The Earth Alliance recognizes cultural sovereignty. However, we also recognize that sentient rights supersede cultural practice when those practices involve destruction of self-aware life. These children display clear markers of sentience. They communicate, they learn, they form emotional bonds." "They are defective," the ambassador countered. "One is blind. One has a malformed wing. One lacks the physical size necessary for survival. In our environment, they would die within months." "But they're not in your environment," Grant argued. "They're with someone willing to care for them. That changes everything." The tribunal debated for hours. Legal precedents were cited. Cultural relativism was discussed. Dan listened to his and Vara's fate being decided by beings who saw them as either property or protocol violations. Finally, the commander raised her hand for silence. Dan Rivers, you may speak if you wish. Though I warn you, this tribunal has heard extensive legal argument. Additional testimony is unlikely to change the outcome. Dan stood. His legs felt weak, but he moved to the center of the room anyway, every eye focused on him. I'm not a lawyer, he began. I'm just a guy who hauls cargo. I fix engines, I file paperwork, I try to make enough money to eat. I don't know about cultural sovereignty or legal precedents. Kral snorted dismissively. But I know the difference between something and someone, Dan continued. I've hauled cargo across 200 systems. I know what property looks like. Property doesn't beg for its children. Property doesn't stay awake singing lullabies when those children are sick. Property doesn't teach its young ones to be brave when everything is terrifying. He pointed to Pip, who chirped softly. This little one almost died a week ago. Fever that should have killed them, but Vara didn't give up. She watched me hold her child for 30 hours straight, and she learned to fly my ship so I wouldn't have to put Pip down. That's not property. That's a mother. Echo started clicking again, mapping the room with nervous sounds. This one figured out how to navigate without sight, uses sound to build pictures of the world, gets better every day. That's not a defect. That's adaptation. That's intelligence. Patch spread their twisted wing proudly. And this one can't fly like other Scarith, but they climb better than any of them could. Found ways to be strong that the clan never imagined. That's not weakness. That's determination. Dan turned to face Kral directly. You say clan law demands their death, but clan law is wrong. Just because something has been done for thousands of years doesn't make it right. Earth learned that lesson the hard way. We had laws that said some humans were property. We had traditions that said different people had different worth. We fought wars to prove those laws were evil. You dare compare sacred Scarith tradition to human barbarism? Kral's voice rose to a roar. I'm saying that any tradition built on killing children because they're not perfect is barbaric, no matter which species created it. The room erupted in argument. The commander hammered her gavel for order. Lieutenant Grant looked impressed and worried at the same time. One more thing, Dan said into the chaos. Vara didn't steal property, she saved her children, and when she had nothing left, when she was starving and desperate, she asked for help, not demanded, not threatened. She begged, and every species on that station walked past her, everyone except me. He looked at each tribunal member in turn. So if you rule that those children are property, you're saying that beings who can beg, who can love, who can hope are things to be owned and destroyed. You're saying sentience doesn't matter. And if that's what galactic law believes, then galactic law is broken. Dan sat down, his hands shook. He'd probably made everything worse, but he'd said what needed saying. The tribunal withdrew to deliberate. 2 hours passed. Dan sat with Vara and the children, waiting. Pip fell asleep in his lap. Echo clicked softly, soothing themselves with sound. Patch practiced folding and unfolding their twisted wing. Finally, the tribunal returned. The commander's expression was unreadable. This tribunal has reached a decision. We acknowledge the validity of Scarith clan law within Scarith territory. We acknowledge cultural sovereignty as a fundamental principle of galactic society. Dan's heart sank. They'd lost. However, we also find that once Vara fled Scarith territory and entered neutral space, she renounced her clan membership. Without clan membership, clan law no longer applies to her or her offspring. Vara and her children are hereby declared autonomous beings and granted refugee status under Earth Alliance protection. Dan couldn't breathe, had they won. This tribunal rules that Vara may not return to Scarith territory and that Dan Rivers is banned from high clan systems. But within neutral and alliance space, Vara and her offspring are free beings with full legal rights. Kral roared in fury. This is an outrage. You undermine thousands of years of tradition. This tribunal respects tradition. the commander said firmly. But we also respect the choice of an individual to leave that tradition behind. Vara collapsed in relief. Her children swarmed around her, chirping and clicking with joy they didn't fully understand. Dan felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd actually won. 3 months later, Dan's freighter descended through thick clouds toward Haven Colony. The planet below looked harsh, all gray rock and thin vegetation struggling to survive in heavy gravity and thin atmosphere. "This is where we're going?" Vara asked from the co-pilot seat. She'd become an excellent navigator during their journey, learning everything Dan could teach her about ship operations. "Not much to look at, I know, but it's home to people who understand what it means to start over." In the cargo bay, the children had grown. Pip was still the smallest but moved with confident energy now. Echo's clicking had become almost musical, the blind baby navigating perfectly through sound. Patch's twisted wing had strengthened with exercise, and while they couldn't soar like normal Scarith, they could glide impressively. Dan had spent the past months building connections, calling in favors, searching for a place where Vara and her children could truly be safe. Haven Colony kept appearing in his research, a human settlement on a brutal world where difference was celebrated rather than condemned. The landing was rough. Heavy gravity made every adjustment harder, but Dan set down smoothly in the colony's small starport. Through the window, he could see prefab buildings clustered together against the harsh landscape. A human woman waited at the landing pad, gray hair tied back, wearing practical work clothes. Dan recognized Captain Mendez from their video calls. She ran Haven Colony with firm fairness, and she'd agreed to meet with Vara. They disembarked carefully. The heavy gravity hit immediately. Dan's knees buckled before he adjusted. The children stumbled, unused to weighing so much more than normal. But Vara stood tall and straight. Her species had evolved on a high-gravity world. Here, she was in her element. "You must be Vara," Mendez said, extending her hand in human greeting. Vara carefully touched the captain's hand with one claw, mimicking the gesture. "Captain Mendez, Dan speaks highly of your colony. He tells me you're looking for work and a place to raise your family. Walk with me." They toured the colony together. Mendez explained their primary industry was mining rare minerals from the mountain ranges. The work was dangerous and brutal, requiring strength and precision that most species couldn't manage in the heavy gravity. "We've got 15 families here," Mendez said. "Most of us came from Earth's worst regions. Chicago ruins, flooded coastlines, radiation zones. We're used to harsh conditions. This planet reminds us of home." Pip chirped and ran ahead, investigating everything. A group of human children playing near a water collector stopped and stared at the small dragon. One brave girl approached slowly. "Are you a dragon?" the girl asked. Pip chirped and nodded enthusiastically. "That's so cool, wanna play?" Within minutes, Pip was racing around with the human children, playing some kind of tag game. Echo joined them, using clicks to track everyone's positions perfectly, making them impossible to surprise. Patch climbed onto the water collector's roof and glided down, making the children cheer. Mendez smiled. "Kids adapt fast, always do." They reached the mining operations. Massive machinery cut into mountainsides, extracting ore that would be refined and shipped to industrial worlds. Human workers looked exhausted, struggling with the heavy work in crushing gravity. "We're understaffed," Mendez admitted. "Most species can't handle this gravity long-term. Humans can, but barely. We need beings who are naturally adapted to heavy worlds." Vara studied the operation with keen interest. "My species evolved on a planet with gravity 1.4 times standard. This feels natural to me. I could work those machines easily." "That's what I'm hopping, but I need to be honest with you. Life here is hard. We don't have luxuries. Food is basic, housing is simple, entertainment is whatever we make ourselves. And being the first Scarith here, you'll face curiosity and maybe some wariness. Captain, I have lived in shadows, begging for scraps to feed my children. I have been hunted by my own clan for refusing to kill them. Hard work and curiosity do not frighten me. Mendez nodded with respect. Fair enough. I'll offer you a 6-month trial contract. Housing, food, and education for your children in exchange for mining work. If it works out, we make it permanent. If not, no hard feelings. Vara touched her forehead to Mendez's in Scarith gratitude. You give us a chance. That is all I ask. Over the following weeks, Vara proved herself 10 times over. She operated heavy machinery with precision that amazed the human workers. Her natural strength and comfort in high gravity made her the most productive miner in the colony. She also taught the humans better techniques, applying Scarith engineering knowledge they'd never considered. The children thrived. They attended school with human kids, learning reading and math and history. Pip's curiosity made them popular with teachers. Echo's echolocation became a game all the children wanted to learn. Patch helped rescue a child who'd climbed too high on the colony's communications tower, using their powerful twisted wing to carry the kid safely down. Dan stayed for 2 weeks, helping Vara settle in. He taught her everything about human colony life, introduced her to everyone, made sure she understood the culture. On his last evening, they sat on Vara's small porch watching the twin suns set over the mountains. The children played with neighbor kids in the dusty street, their laughter mixing with human voices. You are leaving tomorrow, Vara said quietly. Got contracts waiting, but I'll be back. Haven Colony is on my regular route now. You changed our lives, Dan Rivers. You took 4 refugees who had nothing and gave us everything. Hope, safety, a future. How does one repay such a debt? Dan watched Pip teaching human children how to climb using claw grip techniques. Watched Echo guiding a blind human girl using clicking sounds. Watched Patch demonstrating gliding to kids who cheered every landing. You already did. You proved that worth isn't about being perfect. It's about trying, caring, and refusing to give up on people who matter. Vara's eyes reflected the setting suns. My clan taught me that compassion was weakness, that only the strong deserve to survive, but you showed me that human strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them. We're not always good at it. Humans mess up a lot, but we keep trying. That is enough. Trying is enough. Dan left the next morning. As his freighter lifted off, he looked down at Haven Colony. Vara stood in the starport, her children beside her, waving goodbye. Around them, human colonists had gathered to see off the cargo hauler who'd brought them their newest neighbors. The journey back to his regular routes felt different. Dan's ship was emptier now, but somehow he felt fuller. That rainy night on Way Station 7 had changed everything. One choice to stop instead of walking away. One decision to help instead of staying safe. Maybe that's what being human really meant. Not that they were perfect or always right, but that they chose compassion even when it was inconvenient, especially when it was inconvenient. Dan smiled and set course for his next delivery. Somewhere out there, another being might need help, another family might be struggling. And if he was lucky enough to find them, he'd stop. Every single time.